Coming up tonight on Pole Position, we'll look at Labour's manifesto. Will 2024 be bigger than 1997? Up in Scotland, the SNP are in disarray and Labour's on the rise. Wow. And how do you deal with a heckler? Keir Starmer showed how. Hello, good evening. I'm Kevin Maguire. We've got 15 minutes of all you need to know about the election today on Pole Position. And joining us is Charlie Whelan, my old mate. He's up in the Highlands there. Hello, Charlie. Gordon Brown's former spin doctor, political director of the Unite Trade Union, and a veteran of that Labour 1997 landslide. Does it feel like 1997 all over again?
Well, Kevin, it does a bit, I must say. I wouldn't normally watch a manifesto launch, but as I was coming on your program, I thought I'd better check in. And it did remind me very much of 97. You know, the party that was obviously going to win, but we had to pretend that we weren't going to win. It wasn't so much Starmer as the people he had on. You know, he had the guy on from one of the Iceland supermarket, but then, you know, a guy that was dying of cancer. Then he had a guy who couldn't, afford a home, and then a young lassie, as we'd say in Scotland. And they were the really powerful messages because, they're real people, not politicians.
Yeah, the people who did politics is really all about. You couldn't help contrast it with the Conservative manifesto launch 2 days ago, held at Silverstone home with the British Grand Prix. Bit of a hostage to fortune when the wheels have come off the Tory campaign. But Labour's was slick, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was slick. I mean, I must say. And of course, all you need from a manifesto launch is for nothing to go wrong. I mean, you've already worked out that you don't want anything new. It's about how it appears on the TV news, and it will appear very well on the TV news tonight. And everybody in the Labour HQ will be very happy. It doesn't always work out like that, does it? Because there have been some disastrous manifesto launches, but mostly you want to say as little as possible. And you want to have good pictures for the 6 and 9 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news.
So the style matters almost as much as the substance?
Oh, absolutely. How you look. It's a television election, really, or on your iPad or on your phone. It's how you look is much more important than anything you say. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but of course, the policies do matter, but they've already been agreed, months ago. So you're not going to pull a rabbit out of the hat as some of the journalists want. But of course, Keir Starmer had a great line back from that, didn't he? He said, we're not here for a circus. So it all went very well, I thought.
He was on top form, actually. He seems to have grown during the campaign. Maybe what the prospect of power does to you.
Yeah, I think it's the confidence. I mean, politicians pretend they don't look at polls, don't they, Kevin? But as you very well know, they look at them every day. And Labour will have a pollster, their own pollster, who will showing Keir Starmer every day where the polls are, and he'll see that they're probably 20 points ahead, and that he's going to be the next Prime Minister. So he's going to act like a Prime Minister, isn't he?
And he's carrying that Ming vase over a highly polished marble floor. He did say a couple of weeks ago he wasn't going to start juggling it. Do you think that's what the manifesto was all about? More reassurance than a promise of a radical alternative? Yeah,
I mean, God, Kevin, there was nothing radical in that, was there? I mean, you probably had to read it because you're a journalist, but no, it was just putting forward the message that they're not going to raise taxes. Although, they seem to have boxed themselves in a bit more than Labour did in 97. I mean, all we said was we wouldn't raise the top rate of income tax, I think, but he seems to have ruled out lots of taxes. He is a bit more boxed in. I see my old mate Ed Balls saying that today. It's going to make governing a bit more difficult. He's going to have to find some other taxes to raise somewhere.
Do you think that's a mistake?
No, I don't think.
No rise in national insurance or VAT as well as income tax?
I wouldn't say it was a mistake. I mean, there's an obsession with the media as well, isn't there, about tax? And that's the only thing that the Tories are attacking Labour on is tax. Wouldn't say it was a mistake. Certainly, you don't want to be raising VAT because it's a regressive tax. It hits the poor more. but national insurance, I'm not so sure. I mean, Labour did raising national insurance, didn't they? But there's plenty. I mean, they can come up with new taxes, couldn't they? It could be radical and come up with a land tax or something like that, Kevin.
Yeah, Charlie, I did read the manifesto, as you say. Of course, you know the big bits because, as you say, they're being pointed out. I think the job rights are pretty much intact. I saw Great British Energy, very good idea. A couple of little things I liked were an inquiry into Orgreave and the police brutality in 1984 at the miners' strike, and also a review of taking money out of the mine workers' pension fund, which will go down well. Scottish former coalfields, Redwall, England, South Wales. Did anything in it surprise you, or was it just so well briefed and you knew that just say it's the style of the launch rather than
the only thing I'd say is I'm quite obsessed, as you probably know, about fishing and rivers with my good friend Fergal Sharkey, and a lot of people have been saying we should renationalise the water companies. And I think they've actually been quite canny on that. People say, why don't we renationalise them? But actually, why should we bail them out? I think with the Labour government in power, I'm sure when Thames Water inevitably goes bankrupt, that's the time to move in and take them over, so you're not having to pay any money. So maybe they've been quite canny there.
Yeah, there are it's promises of fines and hitting bonuses of water bosses in companies that don't provide an adequate service, lots of leaks and so on. Do you think that'll work?
Well, what you've got to do is make the water companies obey the law. If they obeyed the law and weren't allowed to put sewage into our seas and into our rivers, then that'll be okay. But I think things will move in that direction. It is actually a huge issue. I don't think the Tories are going to win one seat along the whole of the south coast of England, are they? I mean, not simply because, but one of the big reasons is because of the sewage in the seas.
Yeah, it's one of those issues, isn't it? I don't remember this issue in previous general elections, but people just do not want sewage in their local sea, on their beach, in their river, in their lake. It's just, I mean, it's disgusting and it's horrific, and it's a kind of stinky, smelly, foul symbol of Britain not working the way it should.
And when they see that the water companies have paid out something like £72 billion in dividends, and that money could have been spent on stopping the sewage, then people begin to say, well, hang on a minute, this privatisation wasn't so clever after all. And who did it? It was the Tories, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, Charlie, you are up in Scotland. You're in the beautiful Highlands. Looking from the south over Hadrian's Wall and beyond the Northumberland border, it seems like Scottish politics has been turned upside down after the SNP have dominated since 2007. Labour on the rise, the Tories in a mess because Douglas Ross, their leader in the Scottish Parliament, decided he doesn't want that anymore and taking a sick colleague's seat. I mean, you couldn't. They are killing satire.
Kevin, you genuinely couldn't make it up. So, right, the SNP first. Well, of course, they're into their third leader in about a couple of years. Their previous leader was arrested. Her husband has been charged with some sort of fraud, I think. I can't remember exactly what it is. The Tories, their leader has stolen some guy's seat who was, as you said, who was sick in hospital. So they're in a complete mess. So you'd think that Labour are going to be landslide in Scotland. I don't think it's quite like that, because nationalism isn't like that. Waving a saltire and saying Scotland's marvellous seems to get a lot of people voting for a party that has been totally incompetent. They're in charge of health up here. They're in charge of education. The health service is worse than it is in England. The education is definitely worse than it is in England. But you seem to wave a saltire and say we're Scottish, and people are still voting, well, planning to vote for the SNP. So the latest polls, Labour is ahead, yes, and the Tories are collapsing. But, a substantial number of people here in Scotland are still going to vote for a party that seems to be totally corrupt, that is completely screwed up the whole of the Scottish education system and the health service, and yet they're still therein with the fight. Although I must say, their new leader, Mr. Swinney, you might remember him, Kevin, because he was leader about 20 years ago, and they dumped him because he was so useless.
Yeah, I do remember him. Nice bloke personally, but you got to question his political leadership. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but Kevin, he's just the caretaker, because the real leader is going to be this guy Flynn, who you'll know from Westminster.
Stephen Flynn, very effective. Yeah.
His slight problem is he's not an MSP. In Scotland, you've got to be a member of the Scottish Parliament, really, to be the leader. Salmon managed to be in both houses, didn't he? If you remember. But so watch out for that one. Swinney, after this election, or after the SNP don't do very well, he'll be dumped, and they'll be hoping to get Flynn in. Although up here in the Highlands, we've got a young lassie called Kate Forbes, who's a member of the We Free Church, doesn't believe in abortion or sex out of marriage, and all sorts of bonkers things you wouldn't believe still existed in this country today. She's going to be going for the job too, and she very nearly won last time.
Yeah. What's a decent result for Labour in Scotland this time around, Charlie? Because last time, one seat won in a by-election down here along the way, but the SNP, Conservatives and the Lib Dems all had more seats in Scotland, once a Labour bastion, the party finished up with.
Well, it's very difficult to judge, Kevin, because there's a lot of very marginal seats. Now, in Scotland, we've got the Central Belt, which is Edinburgh and Glasgow, which 90% of the population live in. And that's where the real battle is going on for the numbers of seats. I think it's going to be quite close. I don't think Labour is going to do quite as well as people might expect. Here in the Highlands, it's completely different. We've got, you've got to be a Tory up here really to win. So you've got tartan Tories like Fergus Ewing, like Kate Forbes, and you've got the Liberals as well. And the seat I'm in at the moment in the Highlands is a three-way fight between the Tories, the SNP and Labour. With the Tories collapsing, are those Tories going to vote Labour because they hate the SNP and nationalism? We just don't know, really, Kevin. It's really wide open.
Are we talking 15, 20, do you think, for Labour seats?
Oh, yeah. I would have thought, 20 would be a very, very good result. I mean, I'd expect Labour to win 20 seats, and certainly I'd be happy with that. And I think Anasawa, who's been a tremendous leader, really, he's come from nowhere and led the party into a completely new direction, and just as Starmer has down south.
Now, Charlie, there was a heckler at the Labour event. Turned out it was a young woman, Green New Deal Rising, heckled Keir Starmer. He answered by saying, we're no longer the party of protest. We want to be the party of power. Would you advise a politician to respond to the heckler, or just try and ignore them and carry on, because it's really for a TV audience, until they're dragged out?
Well, in this case, he clearly would have had a pre-prepared line because it's a big event, so you do expect a heckler. And he clearly had a pre-prepared line, and it was a very good line. He said, we used to be a party of protest, i.e., under a previous leader who shall not be mentioned, and now we're going to power. So, I think a heckler can be good for a politician, and so long as they got a prepared heckle, which he did, and a very good one, then I think politicians welcome hecklers. And as did the audience said, didn't they? They thought it was a great reply.
No, I must admit, it did look good on TV.
Yeah, again, I used to do courses for engineering union shop MPs who were going to become MPs, who wanted to become MPs. And we used to employ a heckler to heckle them when they were doing their speeches. So all MPs or future MPs will be prepared for hecklers. So it's something that any half-decent MP, and certainly the leader of the Labour Party, would have practiced and had a good line to come back on.
Yeah, in fact, I did that course once. I was a heckler, and for your old union. One of the shop stewards was just talking about why he favoured referendums, and I blush thinking of it now. I shouted out, "So did Hitler!" So ridiculously wrongly over the top, but nevertheless. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really interesting, those insights, particularly because you're in Scotland and you've been there before. You were there in 97, the Labour launched the Manifesto, and God, 2024, you just can't help compare it. But Thank you everyone for watching and listening, whether live or in catch up. We'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m, same place, same time on Pole Position.